Let me explain something that I wanted to figure out with this fantasy baseball. Uh, I know it's stats driven, so um, one thing I wanted to see was teams that are built like a champion. Because if you look through the stats, I mean, obviously, some stats are created. Uh, I mean, they appear to be created equally because there's 16 separate equalized categories, but they're not created equally. Obviously, when a guy gets a lot of total bases, they tend to get more RBIs, more runs created, and some of the other stats fill in on other stats, and et cetera, et cetera. Like so, I mean, obviously, if you have a team that dominates every category, like the Virginia Savages, you're going to have a pretty awesome chance of winning the championship. But um, one thing I've noticed in fantasy baseball that is important and you shouldn't ignore is some stats are obviously more uh, overvalued than other stats. Stats like fielding percentage, which is a total crapshoot in relativity to how well your team does. You could be the best hitting team and the best pitching team in the league and have a crap load of errors, and it's really not going to make your team that bad just because you have a little, not the best gloves in the field. It's not going to ruin your season. And so, what I decided to do is see what teams were actually built like champions, uh, meaning they closely resembled champions of the past, and and how those champions of the past, what kind of stats their averages were, and how that resembles a champion, and how important certain stats are leading to a championship run or a season. Um, One thing I found out when I conducted that research over the last 4 complete seasons of OSMLB was was that RBIs were really important, more important than total bases and runs. But runs created was like your all out. That's something you should pay attention to. Uh, Fielding percentage really didn't tell us anything. That was probably, in fact, that was the one category that didn't have a positive correlation with the champion. All the other stats, the average was for the champion was better than the league average. So like ERA was always lower by average, WHIP was always lower by average, and on base percentage you were always higher. So um, that's the Savages in 2014, Emelianski in 2013, and the Finest in 2012 and 2011. So I basically took the averages of all those championship teams and compared them to the averages of the leagues that they played in each of those seasons, and and I basically figured out what was most important uh, when you look at certain categories and the correlation. So like uh, one that was really surprising to me was save holds. The champion irrefutably has more save holds than the league average, and that just caught me by surprise because relievers don't make as much of a dent as starting pitching. Not only in Major League Baseball, but at a even harsher rate in OSMLB. So I don't know what's the reason behind that. Maybe it does lead to a lower ERA and WHIP overall, which is going to drive your team to victory. So maybe that's just a hand-in-hand type thing. But other than that, quality starts and wins were huge. Ks were pretty big in relativity to everything as well. So I mean, makes sense. Pitchers that throw hard and can strike guys out. I mean, it's a pretty consistent threat to being awesome. Quality starts and wins. That's something I'm looking for this season. I don't have nearly enough of, and I know that's probably why I'm in 17th place at the moment. Uh, but so, okay, taking those numbers, I realize there are certain categories, obviously, that are a little bit more important than some of the other categories. So, uh, obviously, it's all well and great if a team, it's all well and great if a team is putting up crazy numbers, kind of like the Virginia Savages, but it's important to know what those numbers are going towards. So, for instance, one of the least important categories, fielding percentage, versus one of the most important categories, quality starts. You could be an average team at quality starts and super, super good at fielding percentage, like record setting. No one's ever seen this before. You're probably not going to be much better or better at, if better at all, than the team who's relatively better at quality starts and average at fielding percentage, because the team with the most quality starts or better compared to the league average is just going to do a lot better than that team who's fielding the ball better. So we're past that. I think you figured that out, what that means. So I took all the teams' numbers from the 16 categories that we keep, and I tried to figure out what teams closely resembled those averages from our champions, which basically in turn is saying that these teams that are the most closely related to those champions, they're not overdoing it in categories that they shouldn't be overdoing it in, and they're not underdoing other categories. It's obviously none of the teams here are gonna reach a 100% correlation, but I'm thinking anything better than 50%, at least you have a chance at making a run for the championship, which is still 15 teams in this league if you look at the middle of the bracket. But if you're up near the 75 percentile, I mean, you're pretty much guaranteeing a real title run hope here with just pretty much spot on championship-like statistics. And if you're below 50%, I mean, I don't know what to tell you. The 4 teams that were below were Brooklyn, New Jersey, Rhode Island was the worst, and here's a surprise here, Connecticut. They obviously have had stellar pitching stats, but they seem to be overdoing it on that aspect, and overwhelmingly terrible on the hitting front. So compared to our past champions, they don't look very good. Here are the best teams. Here are the teams that are above 70%, and they're actually all above 73%, so it kind of got a nice separation between 3 and 4. So here are your 3 top teams right here. Number 3, the Colorado Lumberjacks. That's a surprise, being that they are in 16th place right now, but they got all the stats and the makings to be a really good team here, so one should think that they're going to turn things around here and get it going. In fact, their crappiest category is fielding percentage, so no, scratch that. That is not their crappiest category. Scratch that. My bad. Stats getting all up in my head. Okay, so they're number 3. Number 2 is the Virginia Savages. I mean, yeah. They're pretty legit. I mean, you look at their record, it's the best up until week 7, so, I mean, this is pretty much, it makes a lot of sense that they're closely related to those championship teams, being that they're probably dominating most of the statistics anyway. And they're probably doing better than the league average in pretty much all of them, considering they don't really lose. So, Oregon City Kings are the number 1 team, and I'm telling you, I'm not lying. I said that back in week 3 or week 4 maybe, when I feel confident enough to make the series prediction. I really think it's going to be Savages versus Kings. I think I said Savages over Kings. I don't think it's gonna be really predictable at this time, but Oregon City, even though they're not right at the top of the ranks, they it's obvious that they have the team makings to be really good. I'm gonna look up their team right now just to prove to you. I know that we're not all sitting on their page right now. Oregon City, Oregon City. I mean, we've seen Virginia. I mean, they don't have any bench as far as hitting goes. Any of those guys gets injured, it could be a problem down the line, but they have a crap load of pitchers to deal. But Oregon City, they've gone with the no catcher approach, which I thought was interesting. I thought that was very interesting because during the season, I was thinking about going with the no second baseman approach until somehow I was able to find Infante, who's one of my favorite fantasy players, albeit not amazing or anything, but he's consistent and gets the job done. But Oregon City is not going with the catcher, and I mean, I would have probably made that choice too if I didn't have Evan Gattis, who's essentially a DH, so he doesn't actually have to sit out many games. But they've got a strong team. Other than that, Joey Votto, Arenado, Tulowitzki, Josh Reddick, all those guys are hitting phenomenally. Adam Lind is their bench first baseman, so he's been hitting phenomenally, except for maybe the last 15 days. But if that's a guy that you wanted to take off their hands and possibly give them a catcher, because it looks like they need a catcher, and their pitching's pretty strong too. If you look at Garrett Cole and Jake Arrieta, Garrett Cole is pretty much guaranteed to have, a strong season. And same with Arrieta, I suppose. I mean, I guess he's kind of got me surprised. But there you go. You know what I'm talking about. Oregon City Kings, Virginia Savages, Colorado Lumberjacks. It's going to be huge.